So, signed comics today, dude.
Yeah, signed comics, and before we even hit into that, cue that intro music. What a world, what a world.
I'm actually getting an intro in time. Things are incrementally improving.
Soon it's going to be like slick butter, buddy. We're getting there.
Yeah, nice.
So like you said, starting this clip, signed comics. In previous videos, we talked about different forms of collecting. You know, if you're not collecting comics, you're not collecting graphic novels, you're not collecting original artwork. This is certainly a different avenue that's I think over the last couple of years has taken up a lot of interest in Steam, and that is getting certain things signed, autographed by the creators, be it artists, writers, or whatever it might be.
Yeah. No, dude, definitely. Yeah, and there's... sorry, I just had a thought in my mind, so you probably noticed the, like...
I did see that.
Yeah, like, I just had this, like, this moment that came to my mind. But yeah, no, dude, and funny enough, it's gonna... Again, I know I sound like a broken record here, but it's going to tie into a video that you and I are working on at the moment. But again, when I first got into collecting, like I was like, I just need to get every famous signature, every go-to guy. And again, I, like a sucker, I got them over time, and then I was like, I don't care about this character or this person or this artist or this writer. And I started slowly selling them and getting rid of them. And now, like, I mean, I brought to show today, we're doing a bit of a show and tell, 3 of, like, again, like, it's a recurring thing that I go, hell yeah, how the hell did I get, this is so cool, you know? And similarly, sorry, I'm tripping over my words here, but it's something else I want to mention that's going to be a contradiction to later, but I really do want to mention it, especially if there's young collectors out there getting into it. When I started and I got into this, I hadn't been to any Comic-Con. We had our first Comic-Con in Africa. I missed it. Yeah. And for those of you, it is building up a lot of momentum. We slowly starting to get really cool people that are actually coming, like, you know, people that like in New York Comic-Con and San Diego, it's normal guests and stuff. But, you know, like recently we got the likes of David Mack, you know, which is just still blows my mind to even think about that, you know. And the reason...
we have Donny Cates here as well.
Yeah, and the reason I bring all that up, dude, is because when you haven't been there, when you haven't physically met someone and met the human that was part of creating this comic, it's so easy to have this cold version of collecting where it's like, I'm only going to collect this signature because it'll grow up in value. And you're importing this comics for us in South Africa, like, and all of mine are imported. And it's, you know, you kind of naively put away and you're like, this is going to grow in value, and you know, we'll get into that too. It's a CGC witness signed comic, but the minute you go there, and first of all you go out and either you've got a book or you search for a book and you get to meet this human and talk to him and get into his mind, and then he still in person signs it. To me, all of the witness signatures, all the proof that you need, the COAs, everything disappears. Because
so
it was that
for folks out there, COA is a certificate of authenticity, yeah?
Yeah, and all of that disappears because it doesn't matter, because you were there and you saw it and it was your moment to get to know that human. And that changed the way I see signatures forever, dude. I haven't gotten a lot more, but I've got these books that I've just kept away and I have no intention of selling them. I'm not going to... Everyone's like, why don't you send a CGC? And I'm like, I have CGC's, disclaimer, we'll get into that now. But
yeah, we'll give people the context of what CGC is, etc. We're going to get to that.
Yeah, but right then and there, I was like, I mean, just for some, I mean, you mentioned Donny Cates, and I got him to draw on a blank sketch of it. He's a writer, for those who don't know. So he's not even an artist, but he drew like a little Venom for me. And again, like no one can recreate those moments. And we do have photos, and we'll actually must put it up on our social media, because you and I at Comic-Con Africa together, some throwbacks and stuff. But
definitely.
And I get the feeling like that's kind of, and I don't know if we want to dive into your stuff first, but that's what it was for you. I mean, you got to meet Ron Mars, and like I haven't, and I didn't know about any of these guys. I did come to the game quite a bit later than you, but so that's why it's really thrown me off my game and shifted the way I think. And again, and so you can see why this ties into the other video that we're gonna be working on, because it's very similar sort of style of thinking. So like I said, I'm gonna probably I am presenting 3 CGC comics. We'll explain that now, as Warren mentioned, but I just do want to note that anyone out there, you can get it. You can get sold into the getting it witnessed, and it gets sent away, and it gets slabbed in its own container and all that. But if the moment is enough for you, that should just be it, man. You shouldn't need any other motivation or reason. Sorry, I'm tripping over my words again, yeah. But you shouldn't need any validation that what you're collecting means something. If it means something to you, that's it. Period.
100%. And I love that statement right there. That's awesome.
Yeah.
There's the promo right there. I get you. I think getting stuff autographed or signed isn't a new thing, and it's not unique to comics. I know there are collectors out there that collect musical memorabilia, like drumsticks from certain their favorite drummers, or try and get an autographed record or album that the band did, and try to get all the signatures on it. They try to get it authenticated, framed, and there are all kinds of regulatory bodies out there that do authenticate these things. And like Mark was referencing, CGC, it's a grading company out of America, and they not only grade and authenticate comic books and assign a value to them, but they also authenticate signatures on comic books. And I think that works in the sports industry. You can get rugby, football, whatever it is, kind of jersey
cards,
signed.
Yeah.
And they will be authenticated, and folks like to have them put in frames, displayed in their houses, or whatever the case might be, preserved in time, if you like. And I do agree with you. My motivation for doing it is I just need an artist to catch me. I need once just to pick up a comic or graphic novel and look at this thing and go, wow, this art is just, it blows me away. The way the flow, the way he represents that character or whatever it is, just if it hooks me once and I fall in love with that artist for that, I my natural progression is I want to try and find a comic that they've signed and autographed. The same thing for a writer. If I've read a story by a certain writer and it's literally just left me breathless or brought a tear to my eye, made me laugh, whatever it is, had some profound effect on me, I want to find a comic book that person wrote and have them sign it. Now, like you said, in some cases we have to find the things overseas and bring them in and import them, but nothing compares to that experience, like you said, man, being in front of that person, getting to interact with that person, talk to that person, get to know the human behind this amazing piece of work, and get that autographed. And I'm glad you brought up the Comic-Con experience and you touched on it, because the first ones I have, firstly, is a comic over here called Kabuki. And this particular Kabuki even comes with a certificate of authenticity, and it was signed by the creator and artist, a guy named David Mack. And I wanted to do a concurrent one and show off this Daredevil comic book that the art was done by co-story, but the art was also done by the same artist, David Mack. And down there, right in the corner, there is, I'm trying to get this so that it doesn't reflect badly. There's David Mack's signature. And as Mark mentioned, him and I got to meet David Mack at Comic-Con Africa. And that second comic, the Daredevil one, David Mack signed for me in person. And I don't have a certificate of authenticity. I don't need a certificate of authenticity. Just the time I got to spend with David Mack and talk to him and get to know him, that signature there was out of this world for me. That's something I'll never forget. And you can't take it away from me.
Just a side note for anyone who doesn't particularly read comics and stumble on this video somehow. David Mack is famous for, he did the art on a comic called Alias. It's in the Mack series, and it's the TV show Jessica Jones. All the art and the look and feel of the show, especially in the title sequence, is based off David Mack's art. He's very famous for this watercolored based art, which in the cover that Warren just showed of Daredevil, where it's very splashy and stuff. So
watercolory.
He's super unique. Some people love him, some people don't love him so much, but like Warren just said, us getting to meet him, it was a big deal, man. And he did a really cool sketch for me, a really quick sketch. I'll show it some other time, maybe in another video. I don't want to break the flow here.
No, sure. But to kind of paint a picture for folks, I've got all my signed comics and rare comics I keep in these little black binders, A4 binders in plasticky kind of sleeves, etc. And to kind of paint a picture, I think I can get about 15 to 20 comics in each binder, and I've got about 10 these black binders just filled with signed comics. So I've got well over 100 or so of these things, and I just can't get enough. I've still got a list of people I'm trying to hunt down. The next one, in fact, the next few are quite special to me because they are creators that just, for me, rocked my world. And I think all of them, my good friend Mark over here managed to find and bring in for me. So the first one out of the gate is a signed issue of a comic called Supreme. Those of you that don't know, the writer on this particular comic was a writer named Alan Moore. Probably one of the greatest of all time comic book writers ever. Did a few stories, most notable being The Watchmen. They made a movie on it. There's a series now that's out on it. And for those of you, a quick synopsis, Alan Moore at one point kind of had a fallout with the comic book industry, particularly DC comic books. Because of that fallout, he's divorced himself from the industry. And this particular comic, because of how he's removed himself from the industry, this is like gold to get a comic signed by Alan Moore. And it's even got a certificate at the back to authenticate it. So Mark managed to track that down for me, and he's one of my favorite writers, probably top 3 writers ever. And just to have that, because he's no longer associated with comics, the rarity, everything, it's a very special little gem in my signed comic collection. Next one I have is another one Mark got for me, for an assortment of reasons, is
we have brought it up. I mean, in the series, so Killer Story. So
in the last series of clips, the Killer Story, it's one of my all-time favorites. Not just Superman stories, but just stories in general. Always brings a tear to my eye. And I said in the last clip that I believe, and I think I'm not alone, that Grant Morrison, the guy who autographed this, the writer of the story, is, for me, the greatest comic book writer to date, because he's had relevant stories, game-changing stories, emotional stories, you name it, across every major publisher. No matter what character he touches, he seems to be able to leave his mark there for years and years to come. And he's been in the industry for a good, I dare say, 4 decades now. And in every single decade, he's changed the game. He's made an impact. And I don't know of any other writer that's managed to do that. So this, for me, just because it's a Grant Morrison and just because it's my favorite Grant Morrison story, it's another gem for me in the crown of my comic book collection.
Nice.
And my last one is by another one of my favorite writers. It is Spawn number 9. Spawn wasn't the character he created, but this particular issue, the creator of Spawn, Todd McFarlane, got Neil Gaiman, my favorite writer, to write the story. He introduced this character on the cover called Angela, and Mark managed to track down this issue for me that somewhere in the logo over here is signed by Neil Gaiman. For me, it's on multiple levels here. It's the fact that it's the origin comic, the first time this character appeared. It's a character Neil Gaiman created. And because he's one of my favorite writers, this one's very, very special for me, not just because it's one of my favorite characters as well. I've loved the character from Spawn, subsequently through a whole bunch of weird history. She now is in the Marvel world. Marvel bought the rights to her, and she's a Marvel character, and I love her there too. This is a special one for me because it's signed by Neil Gaiman. So thank you to my good bestie, Mark.
Shot.
I love you, man.
You brought out some big guns there, dude. And then there's a couple of those signatures that I still want to get, but I'm going to change my order that I want to bring out, and you'll see why.
Okay.
You're done, right?
I am done, so it's over to you.
So it's a crossover, same signature, but mine is an Alan Moore signature. And as you guys will see, I'm going to just try show you as best as I can. This is a CGC. You'll see it's encased, so the book can never be opened again. And a lot of people will be like, why the hell would you want to do that? And it's a very good question, because the idea is to keep it in its original condition so it never changes. And as you'll see, they grade it. So that's a 9.8, which is pretty much up there. This is a title called Crossed. I don't know the title specifically, but the reason why I've brought it up is because you've already given us a little bite-sized part of the information where Alan Moore was in the industry. He blew up. He did all sorts of things. You mentioned Watchmen, and a few other titles he's done is V for Vendetta and The Killing Joke, the famous Joker storyline. And DC kind of screwed him over the rights, and there's a whole story to that. There's so many sides, but he kind of just called it, like you said. He was like, I'm out. And the apparent story goes that he was at one con where CGC were present, and he signed a handful of books, and CGC witnessed it, and that was around there where he called it.
Wow.
So he never ever did any of the CGC witnessing. And for those of you who don't know, like especially new to collectors, you get sold into this. It's the popular thing to do. But the reason I made an exception for this book, even though I don't know the titles, as you mentioned, it's just such a damn rare signature.
And because it's authenticated, they actually witnessed Alan Moore signing that comic book and validating it.
Yeah, and that's why I definitely made an exception for this book. Like I said, I must probably get around to actually reading the story and seeing if I actually like it, but this is purely an exception made on the fact of how stupidly rare it is. The next book I've got, and you'll see this is done by a different company. They're competitors of CGC. They're called CBCS. You'll see it's the same concept. It's a slab, and it's got info. It just looks a bit different. This is Daredevil issue 158, and the reason I've got that, it's in a 9.0 graded condition. It's signed by Frank Miller and Klaus Janson. I always get his name. But the reason I've got this is because of Frank Miller. And for those of you who don't know, Daredevil started in Volume 1, and it was an okay title. For the most part, a lot of people didn't pick it up. It was a blind superhero. No one really found it exciting. But from issue 158, it's when Frank Miller came on board. And shortly after, he created Elektra, which for you, those of you who don't know, it's basically Daredevil's the female sort of equivalent to her, and she challenges him, and she's kind of plays between good and evil. And the title
and there was a movie, the Ben Affleck movie that a lot of people don't want to talk about, but it had Ben Affleck, Jennifer Garner in there. That's actually where they met, fell in love, got married. In real life, I'm saying Ben Affleck and Jennifer. And then recently, Netflix had the Daredevil series, and in season 2, I think they brought Elektra in. And that was all Frank Miller's characters.
Yeah, exactly. So, and that's why. So it was Frank Miller's sort of brain behind all that, and he really reignited Daredevil. And a lot of people started picking up on that. So I'm just, as you've heard multiple times if you watched any of our videos, I'm a Frank Miller fan. So, and I love Daredevil. So the issue that he came on, so issue 158 might not be special to most people, but it is considered a minor key if you really want to get into it. But so I got that because it's, as you mentioned, it's relevant to him. And he's definitely always been, I wanted and I still do, a Sin City issue 1 with his signature on. I haven't really looked that hard, but
well, that's the beauty about collecting, man. You make these little milestones and checklists. So if you want it enough, you'll find it one day.
Yeah. And then the last one I've left, this is an easy one for people to get swallowed into. And I actually had multiple signatures of these, and I've sold some of them off, and I've kept one. It's my final CGC. It's a 9.6 witness signature, and it's signed by Stan Lee.
Stan the man.
Yeah. So again, also, side note, this is Uncanny X-Men issue 266, which is the first full appearance of Gambit, my favorite X-Men. So that was the
character that was created by Jim Lee, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and, I think Jim Lee created Gambit.
And well, I know Andy Kubert did all the art in this, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, but because Stan Lee had such an integral part of the X-Men, and I wanted a Stan Lee signature, and Gambit's my favorite X-Men together with Nightcrawler, it seemed like a really good combination at the time for me to get. Now, having said that, I know Stan Lee has signed every toe and every boob of a fan, or and you know, rest in peace, dude. So a lot of people have mixed feelings on his signature. A lot of people like it should go up in value because he's passed away. I don't care about that. A lot of people said, I saw a comment the other day that people they said people should get discounts on Stan Lee signed comics because there's so many of them. A bit harsh, but to
you know what my take is there, dude, is it's in the signature collecting world. I don't think you could class yourself as anywhere near a serious collector of signed memorabilia unless you have the man Stan's signature. I think
and that was the thought process behind it. To me, whether you like it or not, he was a legend. So so that's why when I found this combination, that was a sort of a slam dunk for me. But yeah, just going on your list, I've been hunting down, man, trying to find Neil Gaiman and Grant Morrison that I can afford to decide to part money with, but they're on my list, man, big time. So,
and I think that's a good point to kind of give folks that are watching a bit more context. Is me, my own personal preference. I like my comic books not graded or slabbed or authorized by these houses like CGC or CBCS, as Mark was showing you. I like the tactile feel. Every now and again, on some of my comics, I like to open them, just look at them. I like the smell, the touch, the feel. I also find that for a whole assortment of reasons, the verified CGC comics are a lot more pricey to find and come by.
Yeah.
And I don't think I necessarily prescribe to the grading mechanism of this is 9.8 out of 10 or 9 out of 10 or whatever it is. I just want the comic. I want to have it in my possession. I want to be able to tick it off my list. If it's in pretty good shape, I'm happy with that. But what I can say that I do definitely see the merit on is in the signature, getting a signed copy of something. I do see the CGC value in that someone has authenticated the signature, either down the line because they know beyond a shadow of a doubt that that's that particular person's signature, or one step better, they were actually there, they were present, they saw this writer or artist signing that particular book. They have then taken it, put it into one of these slabs over here, sealed it for preservation purposes, and you get their 100% guarantee that person actually signed that book.
Yeah.
Now, all the ones that I have, I might have a little certificate, or in some cases I have someone's word or a photograph that proves it. I don't have 100% verified guarantee that it actually was that person signing it, but I'm living in what I like to call ignorance is bliss mode in my particular signed comics. And like you said, it's good enough for me. I'm not planning on reselling these. They're in my collection. Every time I see them, in my mind I go, wow, Neil Gaiman actually put ink on this thing and signed it, or Alan Moore, or whomever it was, and that's good enough for me.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Your side on the CGC thing?
Yeah, dude, it's interesting. So I know I kind of, I said I've contradicted myself in the beginning because of how my mind changed over time, but
yeah,
I'm exactly where you said that, where, unfortunately in a perfect world where everyone was honest, we could do that, but there has been forgeries out there.
Sure.
So
I mean, we've even seen full comics being forged and printed and everything. Yeah.
No, exactly. So the fact that you're getting something that, to the best that you can, is authenticated to some degree, It already kind of makes you, because we throw so much money at this hobby, you know. So again, I know I just talked about how there shouldn't be any validation, but just to know that to the best that you're getting something that's the real deal, you know, especially when you're importing all the way from overseas and we don't get to see the artists and writers that those guys do. That was the deal for me. But I need to be honest in telling you that I started out as a naive collector going, it's CGC or nothing. CGC books are going to go up in value. You got to get everything CGC'd. And I have a whole like cupboard of 2 crates of CGCs of books that you know, and I don't regret buying them, but I have bought a lot and resold. I mean, just to give you guys some context, I had a first Miles Morales, which, if you guys don't know, it's a new youngest African Spider-Man that comes into the story at some point. I had that signed by Stan Lee, so that's like a first appearance of Spider-Man, you know, signed by Stan Lee, authenticated. But one day I looked at it and I'm like, I don't care. Who the hell... Like, I dig Spider-Man, but I'm not even that much of a fan of Miles Morales. I don't even know his stories. And that's why, like, that's when I know this is more into the video that we're planning, and I keep talking about that, but I kind of had this realization. I'm like, why do I have his signature? Like, I mean, why do I have Lee's signature on this book? Sorry. That's what I more meant. So I decided to sell it, and I could do with the spare money and put it into some TPs and other stuff that I want, you know, like... And someone who's in this, that's strictly only going in for value and thinking they can flip things away, would tell me that's the most insane move I've done. And in their opinion, I suppose they'd be right.
For sure. But in the opinion of some of us else, I side with you. I go, you know what? For that money, you got something that you value far, far more. Be it a graphic novel, be it a statue, whatever that money went to, and that is so much more important to me, and I can see to you as well, the fact that went to something that now you don't only value more, but you love.
And then one thing I do want to add is that, and for those who aren't collectors and stuff, you'll see there's usually a really clear divide. There's guys that collect only in CGC and guys who hate it. And I'm, as you can tell, both of us somewhere in the middle, you know, which is, I think, rare. But what I do want to add is I do think there has to be some kind of regulatory board or regulations or someone trying to do something. And you can love or hate or agree or disagree. And hopefully they're working every day to do it better and better, right? But I'm just happy that someone established something. And there's 2 or 3 companies out there. There's more now that do it. Because... I do think people need to, you know, like if you look at the sort of average person, they're like, oh, comic books are like these little books with pictures for kids. And all of a sudden it's like, no, this book's worth $2,000. It's like, what? So it does pull a weight and a seriousness to comics, which, you know, for you to justify a normal person, like, I got this and it means something, you know, like, again, I know I shouldn't want that validation. So like I did give you guys sort of a warning that I was going to contradict myself, but it does go, there's a reason I have this, and it does mean something and it's worth something. So just leave me alone, you know, because like you mentioned, sports memorabilia's got it. There's literally people that dedicate their lives to authenticating signatures. You know, there's
baseball cards, baseballs, whatever.
And I'm just glad that comics gets the same treatment to that degree. You know, and it still is new, but yes, obviously, like anything, there's going to be someone trying to sell you a CGC that means nothing. And if you like the cover, cool, but you know, and also just from a basic point of view, I don't think we covered. Well, you did cover a bit of it, but the nice thing is from a distance from a CGC, you know, you can frame it, you can put it on the wall. It does protect it to some degree, and it has the basic details. You know, it tells you what the title is, the year that it was released. It has a special barcode and it tells you how many of these have been graded. It tells you the significance of the comic. And then finally, as you mentioned, the grade, which is a 1 to 10. 10 being a perfect gem and 1 being, I think it's referred to as fair, which is obviously pages torn.
A couple staples in a page or something.
And then it gets further where, you know, books have been professionally restored and this company goes out of their way to let you know about that, or if there's been amateur restoration where someone's cut it in corners or taped it back together, and and they note all those specifics, and then there's a site you can go to on theirs that gives you all the graders' notes on the day that guy noticed that, and that in his opinion that's why it's got that grade. And obviously we make the joke the whole time that someone, a grader can pitch up that morning of work and his girlfriend broke up with him, and he's like, I'm going to give this guy a freaking 6 just because I freaking and again, I suppose that's the chance you take, or there's the argument that they could drop your book as it arrives there and you have very little to hold them to approve on that, and you'll get back a horrible grade, or they could switch your book out.
You don't know.
These are chances you take. So, that you've got to read and do your research, do your homework, as you have said in I think a couple of videos, and decide what's best for you. So,
I think it also goes back to what you were saying, dude. If it's that one issue that means something, the world to you because of who wrote it, what characters there, whatever the case might be, what's wrong with a little validation maybe, or getting it authenticated? And the other side of the coin is what's wrong with being able to open that gem up and look through it and get that old, new, whatever comic smell to it, the tactile connection with it. I think both have their merits at the end of the day.
Yeah, because it's interesting you mentioned that.
What makes you happy?
Now I'm going on. So commonly, just those people out there don't know, a lot of guys would CGC, Signature Comics, as I just showed you, or they would, get comics slabbed that have significance, where it's the first appearance of a character, and that I do find contradictory in its own, because all my key issues, so to speak, are slabbed for that to remain in their condition and all that jazz. But it is a little bit ironic that you have the first appearance of Hulk, but you can't open that book and look at the first appearance, the first panel that he was on, where he jumped out and with his claws and in all his glory. And that kind of, to me, I sit and I've questioned my own sort of motivations. I mean, like, I can't open this book. This sucks. So like I said, I am a bit of a big contradiction in general, just on the whole thing. So
you know what? It is what it is, man.
Yeah.
That's you.